I am now pleased to introduce our keynote speaker. Michael M. Crow became the 16th president of Arizona State University on July the 1st, 2002. He is guiding the transformation of ASU into one of the nation's leading public metropolitan research universities, an institution that combines the highest levels of academic excellence, inclusiveness to a broad demographic, and maximum societal impact. A model he terms the new American university. Under his direction, the university pursues teaching, research, and creative excellence focused on the major challenges of our time, as well as those central to the quality of life, sustainable development, and economic competitiveness of Arizona and the nation. He has committed the university to sustainability, social embeddedness, and global engagement, and championed initiatives leading to record levels of diversity in the student body. During his tenure, the university has nearly quadrupled research expenditures, completed an unprecedented infrastructure expansion, and was named the nation's most innovative school by U.S. News & World Report in 2015 and 2016. I add a couple of sentences. Many of you would have loved to know that I happen to have inside information to know where Dr. Crow was hanging out on Saturday mornings if he was in town. Dr. Crow, I never divulged the secret, but he was with his daughters as they developed their talents, and it was always a pleasure to hear about that commitment to his family. 3 weeks ago, we gathered to plan out this event, and I learned that he had just taken a middle-of-the-night flight from back east to get here in time so that he could hear his daughter speak at a school event that she was a speaker at. I express my appreciation to a room full of leaders for one of our great leaders taking us into the future global economy. I consider him to be a very well-balanced leader that goes 90 miles per hour thinking of new ideas and 100 miles per hour implementing them. Please join me in welcoming today's keynote speaker at our economic forum, Dr. Michael Crow.
Thank you, John, and thank you to all of you for, here we are in a holiday week. And my wife says to me, "Really, they're meeting?" I said, "They're meeting." And so what I'd like to try to do today is affect your mindset. And before I work to affect your mindset, what I'd like to do is first say, in all sincerity, that my family's lived here now for almost 15 years. I've lived in many states. I moved around a lot as a kid. I've lived in New York City. I've lived in Chicago, San Diego, Jacksonville, Corpus Christi, Texas, Missouri. I won't go through the whole list. This is the greatest place that I've ever lived. This is, I think, the place that has the most potential of any place in the country. But our achievements in the past, the economic success of the past, the opportunity that has been produced in the past, all of it is fine. It's great. It's also in the past. When I meet with our football coach in a few weeks, it'll be great that he had 2 10-winning seasons 2 years ago. That's really of some limited interest to me. What's of interest to me is, what did we do this year? What did we do against the University of Arizona this year? And how much better it's going to be next year. And in all seriousness, that's the only way to look at things, is with cold, steely eyes about how competitive you are, not how competitive you were. Those aren't the same thing. And in the broader world of the economy that we live in, we can all bemoan the fact that the world has shifted, that it's moving faster than any of us feel comfortable with, that it's in some ways even inexplicable, that technology is having this unbelievable effect, both positive and negative, on both economic outcomes, social outcomes, cultural structures, the structures of the country, everything that you can possibly imagine. All of this is going on, and you can say, well, I wish it wasn't so. Okay, that's a child's wish. What I mean by that is technology is not going away. Everything that's being developed is not going away. In fact, before I even start my talk, I'll just give you one little thing. I was in Morocco a couple weeks ago for a meeting that was a part of a foundation that is a big investor at ASU. And one of the people that spoke at this foundation meeting was one of the two top brains at an organization called Google X. And Google X is the think tank inside Google, so you can imagine what goes on in that thing. Everything imaginable related to computation, producing economic opportunity, but not necessarily employment. You can create economic opportunity today without creating employment. You create the economic opportunity in different kinds of ways, and here's what he said, in all seriousness. Within 15 years, 30% of all jobs that are presently being held will be displaced by technology definitively, for which there will be no opportunity for reemployment. Now, he may be wrong with the timing, 15 years, maybe it's 18, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 22 years. He's not wrong with the model. And here's what he suggested, the number 2 person at Google X. We need a tax structure to tax all the people that will be able to benefit from those new technologies, who will be richer than people have ever been, and move their income to all the people who will no longer be employable in anything. And I looked at him and I said, I'm not sure. There's some chance you're crazy. You don't seem crazy. You still have a job. And what I meant by that is that he forgot something along the way, which was that life's success is not a function of money or employment. It's a function of purpose to your life. And so what I'm about to say is that the world is changing. It's not likely to change. You may believe that or not believe that, but I can guarantee you that social disruptions, economic disruptions, social opportunity, economic opportunity, both disruptions and opportunity, are what lie ahead, and our region is underprepared. So let me walk you through that. I titled this talk, Growth, Innovation, and the Future of the Arizona Economy. Let's take a look at that economy in its totality. This is the totality of the Arizona economy, every single good or service produced in Arizona between 2005 and 2016, call that a 10-year window. You see the recession, you see that steady growth, that unbelievable economic growth. That's billions of dollars in the economy. This is one of the largest, this is a top 40 global economy if this state was a country. You see the level of decline and a 10-year recovery, longest in the country. Deepest slide, longest recovery, very painful, very hard, very challenging. Just now, back to where the economy was. Never experienced in Arizona's history before. And this cattle prod shock has not had much effect. It hasn't had much effect, so let me have a little bit more effect. This is the entirety of the Arizona economy. Every graphic that we're using here is built to scale. So everything blue is the Phoenix part of the Arizona economy in its segments. We're a real estate and government economy. Those are not long-term successful economies, real estate and government by themselves. You can see all of rural Arizona is the gray in the far right corner. The entirety of non-metropolitan Arizona economic activity is in that gray box. It doesn't mean it's not important, it's just not very big relative to driving the state. You can see Phoenix relative to Tucson, relative to Flagstaff, relative to Yuma, and then you can see the size of each of the areas. So this is a service economy, government economy, real estate economy. So just keep that in mind. Here is how we've been doing in the last 20 years on per capita GDP relative to the US average. So if the US economy is going up and per capita gross domestic product, that is, you take the entire economy and divide it across all of the people, and are you at or above the national average for that same calculation? Well, these are western states. I think the lighting's maybe not so good. California, Texas, Colorado, Oregon, Utah, and down at the bottom, Arizona, 76.6% of the per capita average. And I hear every possible lame excuse for that from everyone all the time, that we're at 76% of the national per capita GDP. Well, then why were we above 90% for 40 years? Why were we above 85% and almost 90% within the last 20 years? Why are all the other states either even, basically even, or going up, and we're going down, and people look at me and say, what are you talking about? It's like this doesn't mean anything. This is a gap falling behind the rest of the American economy. So this is per capita personal income, which is different than per capita GDP. So this is income, that portion of the economy not assigned to machines, but assigned to people. And it's two cities. The top city, the blue city, was above the national average for the period between 1970 and the year 2000, had a steep decline. The gray thing on the right side of the chart is the recession that we went through in the early 2000s. The orange city looks like it's in some kind of steady decline. The blue city seems to have had some kind of economic change, moving back to its position of being near the national average, and the orange city is in some kind of massive, massive decline. Well, the orange city is Phoenix, metropolitan Phoenix. What's the blue city? Metropolitan Detroit. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time sort of somehow counting our eggs and saying somehow, there's all kinds of things that are going on around the country, and isn't it so terrible about what's happened in Detroit? It is terrible what's happened in Detroit. They got over it. They regrouped and are moving forward and building a knowledge-driven economy. This is a very important slide. This slide is, oh, by the way, I'm going to convert to something that a number of people that live here tell me, that there's no correlation between the following things. Economic performance is what I've been talking about. And now I'm going to turn to educational attainment. I've been told by a number of people, including leaders in the East Valley, that anyone that talks about the relationship between economic performance and educational attainment doesn't know what they're talking about. So you're about to hear from someone, me, that apparently doesn't know what I'm talking about. Because these individuals have said to me that there is no correlation between educational attainment and economic performance. And I'm like, okay. Run, Spot, run. Dick and Jane. So you can see what I think about that. So it turns out this is bachelor's degree attainment for people 25 years or over, and the rate of change. You can see in the western United States, the two states that are struggling are Arizona and New Mexico. Colorado is at the top of the pile, and you can see the recession again. You can see how different behaviors are going on relative to the recession. You can see the trend lines in the different states, and keep your eye on Colorado and Washington. Just keep your eye on those two states, because it might be that there actually is a correlation between educational attainment and economic diversity, economic success, economic growth, economic inventiveness, and the building of a new economy. So this is a complicated chart. It's 10 years of data showing growth in the economy on a per-person basis in each of the same states. Look at Texas, the green line. Unbelievable movement from below the national average to fully well above the national average while driving up educational attainment at the same time. Look at Colorado and California, Oregon. 3 states are downwardly slopes. That is, their economies are moving south. Nevada, New Mexico, and Arizona. All of those states are adding to college degrees. In the case of Arizona, almost all of the college degrees that are being added as net increases to the population are from people older than 60. College graduates coming here to retire. As opposed to Colorado, which attracts 3 times as many college graduates per year as they produce. We do not have that same attraction of younger college graduates under the age of 25. This is a very important slide also. This slide, you've seen this before, and I know apparently there's no correlation, but it turns out this is the per capita investment in higher education by state. That's Arizona in the red on the right, Wyoming on the left, more than $700 per person per year. And I'm not suggesting that someone invests that. But it does turn out that there's an actual relationship between investment and outcome, particularly relative to numbers of degrees that are produced. This is a calculation of business and higher education research expenditures, and I'm sorry to mention California because we really couldn't fit them on the chart. So they're at $100 billion of business and education research expenditures. The next is Massachusetts at 20, followed by Texas at 20 billion. You can see where Arizona is, sort of in the middle of the pack. High potential, lots of ability, lots of ways to make things happen, but not at the scale of these other states. And how many of you, if you look at Texas, for instance, as a state, it's had unbelievable economic success, unbelievable economic adaptability. So let's take a proxy. Now, please don't get confused. I'm not talking about patents. I'm using patents as a proxy for environment and innovation culture. They're a proxy. They're an indicator, not the only indicator, a simple indicator that's easy for us to count. So this is in rank order, the number of patents granted in 2015 in rank order by metropolitan areas in the United States, and we're 18th. 1,764 patents. San Jose, that's Silicon Valley. San Francisco, that's the city next to Silicon Valley. New York, you've heard of them. Los Angeles, you've heard of them. Boston, you've heard of them. Seattle, San Diego, Chicago, Minneapolis, Detroit. These turn out to be the areas that have also experienced, and we can show you this, dramatic economic uptick since the recession. So the indicator, patents, not the literalness of patents, the indicator of patents is an indicator of the fact that there is inventiveness and discovery and new ideas and creative destruction and every other force necessary coming out of that particular metropolitan area. Now, this is the rate of change since the recession. So look at the flat rates of growth in patents between 2001 and 2008, and then the changes in behavior as percentages since the recession, which is the gray bar. Seattle, San Diego, Provo, Utah. Salt Lake City and metropolitan, the valley between Provo and Salt Lake City has taken off like a rocket. Unbelievable things happening. You see Tucson there. It's a high rate of increase on a really, really tiny number. So it's a little bit of a misnomer, but it's still positive. And you can see where Phoenix is, somewhere down in the tank near Riverside. But most important here is not the lines themselves, it's the slope of change at the time of the recession. That is, certain places altered their economic design. These are rates of change. Now, this is all the patents issued in 2000 to 2015 in metropolitan Phoenix metropolitan area. You can see Honeywell and Intel, changes in their behavior. You can see the rise of ASU, which was not even on the map in 2000 as a contributor of patents. This is a healthy place, getting a lot done with a lot of different groups, but it's not really taking off. It's strong but not really taking off. And it's also small. So that's metropolitan Seattle. And I drew the line of the behavior of metropolitan Phoenix as the dashed white line where it says Phoenix. So all of the entities in metropolitan Phoenix produce less patents than one company in Seattle. The entire productivity. And again, it's not about patents. The indicator of change and inventiveness in the region is too small. Too small. This is the same for Minneapolis. You can see the line for Phoenix again. You can see the University of Minnesota there. You can see the University of Washington there also, up at the top in Seattle. Now, I picked Seattle and Minneapolis because they are two major, highly significant, successful metropolitan economies with regions in their economies, just like we have, with a single metropolitan research university, in the case of Seattle, the University of Washington, in the case of Minneapolis, the University of Minnesota. We have Arizona State University as the single major research university in this metropolitan area. We've been trying to catch up with those other schools by every technique possible. We have in many ways caught up with them, and we feel in many ways out ahead of the community itself, because the community, in many ways, broadly, hasn't fully, in our view, in my view, really grasped this. Now again, it's not about Microsoft's patents. It's about the level of innovation, know-how, and creative destructive forces within a regional economy that allow it to be more adaptive and to advance. So this is Minneapolis, as I already suggested. Now, let me tell you why this is really something real for Arizona. This is the change in the annual number of firms between 2000 and 2014. You see the gray shade, that's the recession, unbelievable pain, thousands of firms going out of existence. And you see recovery back to a flat number, or basically neutral. That is an indicator that there's insufficient inventiveness, robustness, insufficient newness to the economy for it to continue the kinds of things that were experienced in the past. So here's another indicator. Value of venture capital deals by state. And you'll see Washington at the top of these western states, Colorado, Utah. Washington, Colorado, Utah. Completely different strategies in each of those states. Completely different investment strategies, community strategies, business leadership strategies from the strategies in Arizona. And they seem to be strategies that are paying off by this, again, simple indicator, incomplete, one of many indicators, venture capital deals. And you can see Arizona, and let me add, relative to Arizona, that's even with ASU receiving more venture capital for our spin-out companies in the last 5 years than in the previous 1,000 years. Meaning cumulatively more in the last 5 years than ever. Now, turns out if you want to build an economy, you have to export. These are exports by state: Texas, California, and Washington, the three leading export states in the country. You can see Arizona sort of off to the right. It's blue next to Wisconsin over there on the right side of the chart. Small. Not too small, small, but nowhere near where it needs to be in terms of a robust economy. Florida, Illinois, Ohio, Louisiana, Michigan, some of these are energy-oriented. Most of them are not energy-oriented. This is Arizona's exports. Mexico is the dominant trading partner. Mexico is the dominant trading partner with lots of people, including the country. Mexico, Canada, and China. Everybody knows this. You can see the other countries. You can see how small the category is for Arizona. But now let's look at what's called the labor market churn since 1977. These are jobs created, jobs destroyed, and we're using that word destroyed or destruction, job destruction, the way economies work, as outlined over and over and over by Schumpeter, Joseph Schumpeter, the Austrian economist, are through the powers and forces of creative destruction. One thing replacing the next thing, replacing the next thing, replacing the next thing. And again, this speed of this change, replace, 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 you may say it's too much for me. Okay, it's still the way it is, whether it's too much for you or not. It's the way it's going to be for your children and your grandchildren, because that's what we decided to do. We decided to build an economic system built on investment and capitalism that's built on the replacement of one thing with another thing, and that's how it works. Now, these figures here are not good indicators for Arizona. We're not doing a good enough job at job creation. And our net job creation number, even against population growth, is near zero. People think that it's immigration. It is immigration, but it's this kind of immigration. It is the technological replacement of workers. This is a robot building a satellite. The satellites used to be built by hand. Now they're built partly by hand, partly by robots. You have to ask yourself, who built the robot? Who programmed the robot? Who designed the robot? Who sold the robot? Who built and who designed the satellite, because now the robot's designing the satellite? Who sold the satellite? Who programmed the satellite? And so if you think this is only related to that, let's take a look at this chart. And you'll want to get me to send this to you. So if you want me to send this, I think we can get something out to everybody, or you can just email me at michael.crow@asu.edu. So this is every job in Arizona. This is not a made-up chart. This is a scaled Google graphic chart that's working on 3 dimensions. Every job in Arizona classified according to the level of educational attainment necessary to do the job. No formal education on the left, high school education in the middle, associate's degree or a technical credential there, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, or a doctoral degree, plotted by the scale of the number of jobs in Arizona. So this is a service economy with large numbers of jobs to the left side of the chart. Large numbers of jobs to the left side of the chart. And the color effect is the result of the integration of an Oxford University study on the probability that the job will be replaced by automation. The redder the color, the higher the probability. Now, this chart would vary for every economy and every state. This state is among the most vulnerable states relative to automation that exists. And if you say you don't know what I'm talking about, so I was on the phone the other day with a guy named Michael Bender, who's the chief operating officer of a company called Walmart, but he's the chief operating officer of their digital version of their company. So they have 6,000 technical staff in their San Bruno, California IT center, 6,000 technical staff. And they're working on deploying. How many of you have sent in your order on the internet and just picked it up by your car at Walmart? Anybody done that yet? Well, that service is now available here in Phoenix, and it's being spread out in other areas, which means that at some point, no joke, the jobs that are now the service jobs, and Walmart is one of the largest employers in metropolitan Phoenix and in all of Arizona. You'll go to the Walmart after having placed your order, after voice activating it in your car, driving down the street. The robot will then fill the order, and a robot, no joke, a robot will take it out to your car. And you'll be happy about that, except there'll be 15 people no longer working, who, if they have the level of education articulated here, no formal education and only a high school education, or they don't have the adaptability that might be provided from a technical education or an associate's degree education, they will not be ready or easily able to take on another job. And so this is a vicious cycle of interactions that we're working with. And at the moment, We're spending a lot of time in this community pretending that we're ostriches. And what do ostriches do? They like to pretend that they're hiding. They're not actually hiding, as you know. Just their head is hiding. And their eyes. So, spend a few minutes thinking about what might be some things that we would need to do in a 5-year time frame, a 15-year time frame, or a 15 to 25-year time frame, in terms of establishing something that we were talking about earlier with some folks since I got here, which is, what is the objective of Arizona? If I go to Texas, I can get them to tell me why Texas exists. It might be a little bit full of themselves. Anybody from Texas? No one willing to admit it, one person. And so what I've outlined here is that in the next 5 years, I think we can find a way forward if, as an objective, we change our mindset. And the mindset is we actually have a desire to have an adaptive economy. We actually have a desire to be one of the leading economies. We actually have a desire to be one of the leading centers for innovation and job creation. We do not yet have that desire. And then in terms of that objective, how would you move that forward? Well, we put one thing on the table, and this is not me hawking us. There are no cities that are the highly adaptive places that do not have world-class engineering capabilities at every level. And we have fantastic engineering capabilities here in this metropolitan area, but we do not have one of the world-class engineering invention and training programs. And then relative to tactics in the next 5 years, we need an investment strategy. We need to continue to advance our brand. And we need to do something that we haven't completed yet, which is to unify the business community around the opportunity for massive economic growth, massive economic outcomes. Just remember the slides changing some of the things that were going on in terms of per capita GDP in Washington, in Colorado, and in other places, picking only Western states as examples. The opportunity for everyone, whether it's Cox selling services or healthcare organizations selling services or attracting people here, it doesn't mean that this strategy that's being talked about here is in lieu of something else. It's in addition to and catalytic relative to everything that's already here. How do you take the existing outstanding economic platform that's here and make it not among the most competitive, but the most competitive, the most capable, the best place that's ever emerged in this American version of capitalism? And so I set as an objective in 5 to 15 years that it's possible for this place to emerge as the leading part of the American economy through change, adaptation, innovation, education, all those kinds of things. A strategy to do that is to create a Stanford level. I'm not talking about the university, I'm talking about the community in which that university is embedded in. Innovation ecosystem, where everybody, every high school kid, everybody coming up through high school, everybody at the community colleges, families, groups, businesses are able to innovate because that's the way that things work. And then within 15 to 25 years, emerge as a leading global knowledge-driven economy in this place with the highest educated workforce in North America. There's nothing that I put on this list, nothing, that's not completely, utterly attainable, nothing. All we have to do is to decide that we want to do it. And it seems to me that the East Valley is a place, and the East Valley Partnership is a mechanism and a vehicle where we can begin the process of thinking through how to make some of these things happen. Now, you might say, no one will support it. Well, we ran some polling data on a matter related to investments a couple years ago that said that the people of Arizona are actually quite clear about their desire to have this kind of future. 88% of the people that answered to the poll said that They favored elevating Arizona State University's engineering school to be one of the top 5 programs in the country. And nearly 70%, and we're not proposing this, said they'd even pay a tax to do that. Now again, I'm not suggesting it, but I hear often from people that they say, well, nobody wants to do these things. Nobody wants to make these kinds of things happen. And again, I'm not suggesting anything. All I'm suggesting is that there's unbelievable opportunity, unbelievable mechanisms to make forward advancement, and we've got a moment in time where the shock has been felt, the numbers are what they are, and there's a time for us to be able to move forward. So with that, John, I'm happy to answer any questions or deal with any concerns or issues anybody's got. So thank you. I'm fine, yeah. I can say, I'm fine.
All right, we just did a team huddle. I'm looking for 10 wins, and we've got 5 minutes for questions before Dr. Crow needs to get off to his next appointment. So we do have a couple microphones, and I know this is that moment where you didn't know for sure if you were going to be able to have time for questions, but you now have some time. Do we have anyone that would like to ask Dr. Crow a question?
There's one over there.
Okay. And here comes the microphone from Chelsea. She takes the corner. She gets good blocking, and Mike Hughes, please.
Could you comment on the importance of what you've just stated, correlating that to the need for all-day kindergarten and what we need to do to get that into place?
So educational attainment is a function of a lifelong educational development process. 2 very significant predictors of lifelong educational attainment. And I understand that there's going to be large numbers of you in the audience that are going to say, what's he talking about? We got too many people overeducated already, and they all seem stupid to me. I'm not talking about the people you hang out with. I'm talking about the broader population. So the single most significant predictor of educational success is your vocabulary at 48 months of age. Anything that we can do to enhance vocabulary at 48 months of age is unbelievably valuable to the learner, not because of the vocabulary. This is the literalness that one has to be cautious about. It's because that is the development of that individual's brain by that age point that enables them to become a better learner. And the sooner that learning process can begin in the world that we live in, since I don't know how many of you are still pulling a plow behind a mule? Anybody? So while that was a vigorous and complex process where you had to make many decisions when we were pulling plows behind mules, we're not preparing a lot of our children to be able to do that. Right now, we're trying to prepare our children to be able to work in an economy that we can't even predict, where a third of the jobs are going to be replaced by robots, where what we thought about as a simple life with one career over your life and a couple jobs maybe in that career, that's not going to be the way the world is in the future. So kindergarten, to your question specifically, is unbelievably important to start the process. Absolutely.
Thank you. Next question. Please, over here.
Would you comment on the success and failures associated with SkySong?
So SkySong was designed as a project in cooperation with the City of Scottsdale, the Arizona State University Foundation, and Arizona State University to create an exemplar location in which entities that wanted to be clustered near a university and be connected to a university could cluster. Entities that wanted to spin out of a university and form a company could also be clustered. Student spin-out companies, of which we've had 1,000 in the last 5 years, coming just from ASU, could cluster and bring together. And so to the extent where we are right now, it's a slow but successful demonstration of a proof point. And the proof point is that we can, in this environment, in this innovation ecosystem that we have, attract multiple technology-based companies at the small scale, help them to be successful, evolve them and move them out, as well as incubate our own and evolve them and move them out, as well as building a small cluster, of which there should be many of these, of an innovation focus, which is different than an office building. So one of the things that we've done there is we've tried to build an environment where people are connected and linked, and ASU works as the glue and the mechanism to bring people together. It's also a project for which the city of Scottsdale purchased the land of the abandoned shopping mall, leased that land to the ASU Foundation. All other investments beyond the public infrastructure are private. All the companies, all the buildings, all the interaction are private investments. And so from that perspective, those are successful ventures and successful outcomes. And I think that as a demonstration project, it is successful. What have been the failures? I like Jim Harbaugh's quote that he gave when he was the coach of the San Francisco 49ers, and they just lost to Denver, meaning they weren't going to go to the Super Bowl. And some reporter stuck a microphone in his face, and they said, how does it feel to be defeated? And he got really mad, and he said, what do you mean defeated? I can't be defeated. We can't be defeated. We cannot be defeated. We can be destroyed, but we can't be defeated. Meaning he was talking about this core thing. So for us, projects like SkySong, we have ups and downs and successes and failures all the time. But the project is still moving forward. The project is still advancing. Building 4 is now open. Building 5 is being designed. We've got a lot of activity going in there. So it's gone a little bit slower than we wanted it to go, but nonetheless still moving forward because we will not accept or even consider concepts associated with the word defeat. And so that's why it's still moving forward through the recession, doing quite well through the recession. So overall, that's my sort of assessment of how we've done on that project so far.
Megan, I think one more question. I saw it over here, please.
Yes, Dr. Koch, Karen Dickinson with Polsinelli. Can you give us your thoughts on the impact on Arizona economy going forward if there were trade wars with Mexico and China that are two of our biggest trade partners? Thank you.
Yeah, so I was in Mexico City last week. We now have funding at ASU, just using ASU as an example. We have funding from the Mexican government to do an energy project with them that will be a part of the privatization of the Mexican energy industry, which will alter the North American energy profile in a positive sense, ensuring with North American, U.S. production and Mexican production, unbelievable security of oil and natural gas resources at a scale that means that our distributed interests in the rest of the world, particularly the Middle East, will be less and less important outside of our focus on protecting and defending Israel, which we must do. And so what I mean by that is that if all of a sudden just that one issue alone, the privatization of all of North America's Canadian, American, and Mexican energy assets, that alone would indicate to you that the power of that footprint could change positively the strategic positioning of the United States in very significant ways, just in that one element of trade alone. Notwithstanding other things that are going on related to energy and water and food security. I don't know how much of the food that we're eating is coming from Mexico, but a lot of it is coming from Mexico. So a trade war, I don't know how you have a war with your neighbor. I wouldn't advise wars with one's neighbors. They tend to be a little bit costly. And so what one can only hope for, and this will be a little bit of my own personal view here, is a great enhancement of the relationships between Mexico and the United States relative to trade, relative to economic opportunity, economic growth. We've got seed fund projects going on right now with Tec de Monterrey in Monterrey and Mexico City between the universities and with the Autonomous University of Mexico, also in Mexico City related to research and economic development and a range of other things. And so I'd say on the Mexican side, we need the strongest possible economic relationship with Mexico that we can develop, and we have to solve this unsolved thing related to labor and labor movement. And we haven't worked that out yet. You can work it out, but we haven't worked it out. Relative to China, that's a more complicated question. But again, trade wars, at least in the history of the last 500 years, have always led to military wars. Significant trade wars have led to military conflicts. And so I don't know if we're in a position where we want more military conflicts with China, so I'm all for. ASU operates a MBA program in Shanghai. We have projects in Nanjing, Beijing, Chengdu, Shanghai. We have 3,500 students from the People's Republic of China attending ASU, paying a premium price to attend, half of whom stay in the United States, a quarter of whom then go on to start businesses. If you look at who actually starts businesses in the United States, immigrants are a powerful driver of new businesses. So I'm for improving trade agreements, making trade agreements work, cooperation, cooperation, cooperation. And I think our new president will be a tough negotiator. I'm for tough negotiation also. And so the toughest negotiations possible to have the best trade arrangements possible, but I think that it's important to maintain those relationships. I'll say one other thing lastly, and that is that it is a global economy, and we're completely and totally interdependently dependent on each other. It's an interdependent relationship that never existed in the past like it exists now. And so that's just really important to think about as one thinks about disrupting things.
Thank you. To our hashtag EVP Econ Forum attendees, please join me in giving our keynote speaker, Dr. Crow, a round of applause.
Okay. Hope that was useful.